From creatures of various mythologies to modern-day legends that continue to intrigue, join me as I reveal to you 10 histories of legendary and mythical creatures. 10. Minotaur. Despite it being a mythical creature that is technically lesser than many others, the idea of the Minotaur has continued on far beyond the story that the Greek mythology that it was born from. The Minotaur itself is described as half man, half bull. Specifically, it has the body of a man, but the head and tail of a bull. I won't go into details, but let's just say that the sea god Poseidon didn't like what a certain king did and didn't do, and his wife paid a price, so to speak. That resulted in the creation of the Minotaur. Yeah, it's weird. Unfortunately for said king, the Minotaur went rabid as it grew up and started to kill his people in order to get nourishment. To combat it, the king ordered a man named Daedalus to make a place to hold the Minotaur. Thus was born the Labyrinth, and the Minotaur stayed there until the legendary hero Theseus killed him. Despite those being the only stories mentioning him, modern mythology and tales have continued to use the idea of the Minotaur, including appearing in legendary series like the Chronicles of Narnia and more. Number 9. Leprechauns. Despite a certain horror movie franchise depicting them as monsters, when it comes to leprechauns, most of us think of them as the wee folk from Ireland. And that's not meant as an insult. They're often depicted as small bearded men that take care of shoes, cause mischief every now and again, and yes, have a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Though it should be noted that trying to find the end of one is impossible, but that's another list. And it's a dream of everyone to find one of these pots of gold at the end of the rainbow, which is why the beloved cereal Lucky Charms is so popular and represented by a leprechaun. Anyway, believe it or not, leprechauns are actually a type of fairy, and as the folklore goes, if you catch a leprechaun, you'll get free wishes in exchange for its freedom. Though obviously this legend has been molded and warped over the years, specifically to saying that if you were to catch a leprechaun, it would give you its pot full of gold. Still, it's a popular legend, and St. Patrick's Day is one of the holidays where the idea of leprechauns is most lauded and praised. 8. HYDRA. According to Greek mythology, the Hydra was one of the deadliest creatures on the face of the earth. It was said to be the son of Typhon and Echidna, two monstrous snake-like creatures in their own right, and dwelled in the lake of Lerna in the Argoland, which is one of the regional units of Greece. The creature was so powerful that its very smell could kill people, and it had venomous breath. Not exactly a creature you want wandering around the world, if you ask me. But one of the details that has persisted throughout history is that the Hydra was a multi-headed beast. However, how many heads it actually had was never truly agreed upon, and this actually led to an extension of the legend, as the Hydra was soon able to grow 2 heads for every single one that a person would cut off, which is something I'll come back to a little later. Another Greek legend notes that the mighty hero Heracles, known in the West as Hercules, was charged by his father Zeus to kill the Hydra as one of his 12 labors. But even to Heracles, the monster was incredibly tough. He had to get help from his cousin Iolus in order to not only beat the creature, but to burn its neck so no more heads could be grown. Ironically, that is a medical procedure that would actually work. In the Disney interpretation of the story of Hercules, the battle with the Hydra is one of the climactic moments of the film, including a shot of the Hydra essentially having hundreds of heads, thus showing how truly monstrous the creature was. Number 7. Phoenix. There are many avenues to find out what a phoenix is, and the concept of this mythical bird is one that is all over media, and it usually sticks to the same concepts. Mainly, it's one born of fire and ash and is said to be immortal in its own way. Mainly, it dies every 500 or 1,000 years or so, and then it'll be reborn from its own ashes. Phoenixes are one of many mythical creatures that can be found in all sorts of ancient folklore, as well as the mythologies of many cultures. The Greeks, Egyptians, and more had stories about phoenixes. The idea of a phoenix being everlasting has spawned many myths, as well as inspired many modern-day stories. including being used in comic books, animes like Pokemon, Monster Rancher, Digimon, and more, and even video games. And as Harry Potter has shown, they can be very good companions, especially since they wouldn't die easily, and if they did, they'll just be reborn. So in conclusion, Phoenix rule, I'm just saying. 6. Mermaids. Depending on what TV shows or movies you watch, you think that mermaids are the coolest creatures under the seas or something that you need to stay away from if you want to live on the oceans. But which is the true state of mermaids? Like many legends, it's hard to say. The first accounts of mermaids come from the Assyria culture, where one of their goddesses took the form of a mermaid in order to punish herself for accidentally killing her lover. Yet in many other cultures, mermaids are basically evil. They'll lure lonely sailors to the water, drown them, and then eat them. And yet, there are also tales of mermaids being loving creatures that have fallen in love with and saved humans in the past. I'm sure a certain Disney movie comes to mind when I say that. The irony, of course, is that there are many who believe that mermaids actually exist, with sightings going back as far as Christopher Columbus and being so recent as the last 10 years. Number 5. Griffin. There are a few mythical creatures that have many parts of many basic creatures. One of the most used in coats of arms in medieval history, and partially to this day, is that of the griffin, which was a beast said to have the head and wings of an eagle and the body, tail, and hind legs of a lion. An interesting mix, but one that has lent itself to many great stories over time. The pairing of these creatures to form the griffin was meant to convey power, as the eagle is the king of the skies while the lion is king of the beasts. Thus, this fusion was no doubt meant to show off how dominant of a creature it was. For this reason, the griffin has had many different purposes in mythology. For example, in Persian mythology, the griffin was seen as a protector from evil, as well as witchcraft and slander. They're also seen as noble, which is why it's often portrayed as good. This is also another creature that had been transferred from one culture to the next. The Chinese, Persians, Egyptians, Greeks, and more all had their own tales of the griffin, even their own names, and what they were meant for. 4. Pegasus. Another fusion creature, the Pegasus, is one that is featured in many grand stories in Greek mythology and beyond. The classic stories are that of him being birthed by Poseidon, don't ask, and being raised by Medusa, don't ask me why. Eventually, though, when the hero Perseus killed Medusa, he took the Pegasus as his steed for some time. He was later caught by another Greek hero in order to fight and kill the Chimera. After the death of the creature, Zeus honored him by making him a constellation in the stars above. It's also depicted that the Pegasus went to heaven with Poseidon and the other gods upon its passing. In the classic Disney movie Hercules, the Pegasus was actually a creation of Zeus as a present to Hercules upon his birth. The Pegasus was a friend and loyal steed during the fight against Hades and the Titans. Despite these limited stories, the Pegasus appears in a lot of Greek art and has been used in various places over the years. Number 3. Leviathan. There have been many terrifying sea creatures depicted in history and mythology, and one of the most terrifying to be conceived was that of the Leviathan. In stories within the Christian and Jewish Bibles, numerous mentions were made of the creature, and it was stated that it had been powerful enough to challenge God himself, which, given that God made the universe, that's a lot of power. But here's the rub that a lot of people have noted over time. The Bible doesn't talk about mythical creatures. They only talk about the ones God made. It even notes that dinosaurs that existed in the world at one time via the book of Job. Yet, the Leviathan is in the Bible and was a creature that was said to be an enormous sea serpent. Another interpretation was a creature that was twisted in folds. This size and strength was the reason God had to strike it down. Isaiah 27:1. In that day the Lord with his sword, great and strong sword, shall punish the Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Since then, the Leviathan has been used as a reference for a creature of great size and has been the name of several real-life creatures over the course of history, including an ancient whale that was a predator in prehistoric times. There have also been many uses and interpretations of the Leviathan in modern-day movies and TV shows. 2. Dragons. When it comes to some of the most popular mythical creatures in history and lore, few are more popular than the dragons, mainly because culture has adapted them to be some of the coolest, most powerful, and most terrifying beasts ever created. But that in turn begs an important question. Where did the idea of dragons come from? Well, that's a bit tricky, because like other creatures on this list, many cultures have had their own kinds of dragons over the years, and it's clear that these cultures didn't mingle before making them. For example, the earliest signs of dragons come from Mesopotamian art, but in these pieces, the dragons are no more than snake-like creatures. Granted, they were massive and had to be struck down by gods, but still. As times evolved, the Eastern culture showed dragons being more like lizards, but ones that were again massive and were much smarter than any other lizard species. Then, in the Middle Ages, the classic version of dragons were born and spread to the West. These are the dragons that are four-legged, usually lizards with wings and breathe fire. And it's this version that is most used in pop culture. Lord of the Rings, How to Train Your Dragon, Game of Thrones, Pokemon, Digimon, and more have their take on dragons based on these original designs. It's honestly quite astounding how we use them, yet we still don't know why the people who drew these original drawings made them. Given how much they're shown, you'd figure that they were real at one time, but the history and science we know states that it's not. Then again, the world still has many mysteries. Perhaps the true origin of the dragon is one of them. Number 1. Loch Ness Monster. If you were to go to the Scottish Highlands, you would eventually find a body of water called Loch Ness. Within those waters is said to be a sea creature not subtly called the Loch Ness Monster. This creature has become such a legend and mythical creature in the modern age that people continue to see the creature even though many people have proven it doesn't exist. So how did this all start, and why is it still being claimed as alive? The first sightings of Nessie, as she is called, was actually not even in Loch Ness, but in the nearby river Ness. It was here that a man was almost eaten by the creature. Since that point, more and more sightings have been declared about the monster in the loch. In 1933, the truly worldwide debut of Nessie began, and following that, even more sightings of a Loch Ness monster came. The frenzy for this creature and proof of its existence grew so great that eventually, many acclaimed scientists, biologists, researchers, and more went to Loch Ness, all of them equipped to try and find proof one way or the other of its existence or lack thereof. I'm talking they had radars, sensors that could scan the bottom of the loch, detect movements from the smallest thing, and more. Nothing definitive has ever been found, even with the entire loch being searched multiple times. Still, even with all that proof, people keep recording sightings of Nessie, and it's getting to the point where people honestly don't know what to believe, because it would be near impossible to believe that so many people are making up these stories to have 10 seconds of fame. But regardless of what's truth and what's recall, there are some truth to the story, mainly in that whether they're faking or not, they got their description of the story straight. They claim that Nessie is a sea serpent of sorts with a long neck and body, which makes many wonder if some kind of ancient creature is living in the loch. What is the truth? It's hard to say, and so you might do well to find your own conclusion to this, because regardless of what you think, the true believers will keep saying Nessie is out there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Which of these history lessons did you enjoy the most? Did you learn some cool stuff about these myths and legends? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on the channel.